Hi, everybody. We are live, coming to you live from Dallas. And I'm going to be sharing this in a couple of groups because this is the second part of what we are going to be talking about: the emotional overwhelm, the emotional resistance, autopilot behaviors, how in the post-op process, people end up getting off track, and then some ways to get back on track. So if you are popping on, please say hello. And I'm going to start sharing this in a couple groups. I have to move. I'm working with like a couple different computers here. So part 2 of our live stream. So how is everybody doing on this Friday? I'm not sure I can see any comments yet, but I'm going to start sharing. So, all right, everybody. So what we had talked about last time is when you get emotional resistance and what pops up when you go through this is we have more of a response or a reaction versus a response. And so these are from your very primitive brain, and this is where autopilot comes from. And so what happens over time is you work on changing these behaviors, you work on changing your food habits, you work on changing your activity plan and things like that. But what ends up happening is that there's always a time that you could potentially go off track, right? And so some people are really good at staying on track long term, but what ends up happening is, again, life happens. And so when life happens, if you don't have a plan put in place, then it's like it goes to the wind. And so initially what we need to know, hey Tina, hey Lori, hey Alicia, so ready for the weekend. Hey Kay, okay, I see you guys. Tina, Marilyn, all right, finally I can see the comments. So what ends up happening when life happens, if you haven't cemented in those tools and strategies, then you go back to that very primitive brain. And I had talked about this actually earlier this week in the Bariatric Mindset book study, because it was part of our chapter 9, which is really about overcoming, regain and overcoming a lot of the autopilot triggers that happen because life happens. And so you need to be prepared for the long term. And one of the things that we had talked about last week with emotional resistance, wanting to change, having a readiness to change, and all of those things, is that you start off really good and then something throws you off track, and then it takes you a while to get back on track. And so in the emails that I send out, I'm very encouraging and trying to give tips to people like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. But in that process, you need to take action. And again, last time, and maybe not the last time, but I remember doing it recently. So it might have even been again in the book study group. And many of you may or may not be in there, and that's okay. But there's a book that I quote a lot in my book, Bariatric Mindset Success, and that book that I quote a lot is Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect. And what he says is it's not what you do once that matters, but it's what you do every single day. So it's not going to McDonald's once, right? Or going off track once. It's what your daily routine is. And so when people typically get off track, they're like, okay, I'll start on Monday. Okay, I'll start next week. Okay, I'll start after Easter. And then after Easter, we have Memorial Day, right? So, okay, well, after Memorial Day weekend, I'll start the 4th of July or, next week. And then, okay, well, 4th of July comes and it's like, well, I'll start at the end of the summer. And so, and then school gets in, and then before you know it, it's Halloween, and then it's Thanksgiving. And then, Marilyn says, have fun in Texas. Have Patricia take you to Cold Peppers. I don't know what that is. But
it's an awesome steakhouse.
Okay. Thank you, Marilyn. So when you get off track, hey, Jessica, it's easy. Yeah, it's easy to fall into that cycle. So what we want to do is give you the accountability. Hey, Elizabeth, give you the accountability and the structure so that you can cement these tools and what I call flexing that follow through. This is something that we use in the Bariatric Mindset Group Coaching Program quite frequently, that flexing of that follow through. It's actually a new tool that we talked about, but you have to use the tools in order to cement the tools into your brain. So if you're not using tools regularly, then it's not going to work for you. And so you're going to go back to those habits when there's stress, when there are difficult situations, when there are emotions that come up, family stuff, work stuff, any kind of stuff. And then when you get overwhelmed, it's easy to go back to those trigger foods or the foods that you use to self-soothe, because that's the cycle and that's the pattern. And so the other thing that we need to also bring into our consciousness is to slow down. So a lot of times we eat very quickly. A lot of times people will get into the habit of acting very quickly. And so we need to also practice mindfulness. And so I talk about this in the book as well. But putting this into practice is very different from reading about it. And so it's awesome that there are people who can take the book and put it into practice. And also that's what we do in the book study. But also in the group coaching program, we kind of take it slower, where there's specific mindfulness tools that people work on from week to week or month to month to really focus on slowing down and being in the present. And it goes farther than just slowing down and chewing your food. It goes farther than using a timer, but really being present with your food. Since starting your book study and doing this simple menu, right? The simple, Simply Balanced. I've lost 16 pounds of my 24-pound regain. That was Marilyn. Yay! She's coming in a second. We're hanging out here. Elizabeth says, oh my, the putting it into the practice, that's the hardest. So the implementation, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And so one of the things that I have realized, and you guys may not know this, but I spent 5 years working with ADHD clients. And if you guys know anything about ADHD, it's kind of like squirrel. And those guys are the hardest to kind of nail down in terms of putting things into practice. And so when I came across and started working with bariatric patients, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many similarities here, even though obviously there's a lot of difference in brain function and, but the things that happen the most often are procrastination, a lack of priorities, a lack of planning, a lack of time management, right? These are life issues. These are not necessarily bariatric issues, but I see them quite frequently in the bariatric community, right? So, and that's another reason why Patricia has her group and the meal planning and the meal prepping, because, right, what ends up, hey Cheryl and hey Karen, what ends up happening is people may have never prepped before. They may have never cooked for themselves before. So they're like really overwhelmed with, oh, I have all this stuff to do, right? So you're busy prepping and planning and trying to make your food and trying to stay on track with that. And then there's water, and then there's fitness. And then there's, oh my gosh, there's family financial stuff. And it's stuff that I kind of talked about in our last live stream too, like the FOMO, the fear of missing out. And of course, a lot of that stuff really happens initially after surgery, but I don't think that anybody really gets out of it, especially if you're going out with family and they're not eating healthy. And so what can happen is, oh, but I want that, but I want that. And so that's where the mindset shift really needs to happen is, but what is that going to do for me? What is that going to get me? How is that going to lead me to where I want to go? And so with the implementation, Elizabeth and others who are interested in that, there's also the mindset shift of how you see food, how you see your life, and how you may use food in your life currently and how you want to use food. And so I remember as a pre-op seeing nutritionists and them saying, food is fuel. And while I agree, because I was struggling with food at an emotional level, I don't think that they really understood what I was going through. And, there's no such thing as good foods and bad foods. All foods are an option. And again, I would get really upset at this because I was trying so hard to really focus on the weight and to focus on the weight loss. And it was this internal struggle that just continued to bubble up to the surface that made me more and more angry. And so that's where I have a lot of compassion with people who are really struggling with the emotional side of food and struggling with their mindset and how they see food and whether they see food as comfort, whether they see food as nutrition, whether they see food as just a pleasure thing or as a stimulus. And again, I say a stimulus because I see a lot of people who, when going to eat, it's like, ooh, ooh, ooh. And that's like the best thing that's happened to them all day long because their focus is on how that food is going to make them feel because other things, hear me now, other things in their life are not giving them pleasure. They're not giving them fulfillment. They're not giving them comfort. And so the goal essentially is to start looking for other things that give you those things rather than food and teaching your brain through a process, right, to really kind of hone in on that, practice that, right? For those who have joined, practice that, flexing your follow through and using those tools so that food doesn't give you this stimulus hit to your brain, to this frontal cortex of your brain, to give you that dopamine hit, that serotonin hit, so that you can say, that's just not for me right now. Like that's not important to me right now because this other thing is more important. And so for you to work on that, I think that that's pure gold. And for a lot of people that I'm working with in the group coaching program, those are the things that we work on. And I think that's really important. So we want to create kind of what I talked about last time, but was getting interrupted a lot, if you guys happen to see that live stream. So we want to focus on kind of observing your thoughts, but not in a 24/7 kind of way, but observing your thoughts in terms of how you respond to food, how you respond to situations in your life that may be triggering. Being mindful, right? Oh, I see a lot of hearts and stuff. Thank you guys. Being mindful in the present of what foods trigger you in a negative way, and then what foods you're attracted to and why. And so really understanding those patterns about yourself and your brain are not going to just teach you in the present, but they're going to lead you down a road long term so that you're leading a healthy lifestyle in the long term. And believe me, I still love food. And I was so afraid that, I wasn't going to be able to enjoy food again. And so right now, my focus is on enjoying food and living a healthy lifestyle, but I'm not going to choose food over my healthy lifestyle. I'm going to choose my healthy lifestyle first. I'm going to choose being able to move because that was something that I didn't have as a pre-op. It was very difficult to move, and I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to that. So, Amy says, I've always wanted to be one of those people who can pass up certain foods like it's no big deal. And that's what I want to teach you, Amy, the follow through on that and the mindset shift around that. So I'm so glad that you're in the group. Yay! Because we're starting next week. Amy's in, and that looks like that's one of the things that we're going to be working on. So that is something that it took a while for me to get to, Amy, but I know it can be done. I know it can be done. One of the things, and I want to share this because you said that, one of the things that I really, really, really wanted to do is I wanted to be able to go to a restaurant, and I wanted to be able to order something that was on my plan that I was satisfied with, and that I wasn't sitting there going, but I want that instead, but I really want that. And then feeling a lack, feeling disappointed because I had to eat the healthy option, not I get to eat the healthy option. And now we went out for lunch today, and I feel like I had a healthy lunch. Like, it wasn't something that I had to eat. It was something that I got to eat. And it was something that, you know, when we're thinking about food overall, no guilt, no shame, no blame. And the other thing that I really wanted prior to surgery that I have now is being able to push my plate away and being like, I'm done and I'm okay with not eating that. Now, there are some times where my head hunger goes, I want that. I want to eat that. And my stomach goes, no, babe, you're full. You're done. And my head's like, but I want that because it's still on the plate. So that I know is still there, but I'm present enough. I'm mindful enough. And these are the things that I teach and that I love teaching and that I love helping other people implement, is that piece where it's like, we don't need to overstuff because that's not going to help us. But being mindful and present enough and being secure and okay with yourself to say, yeah, that's just not for me right now, and I'm okay. That, I think, is the beauty of the process. That, I think, is gold, I think, in terms of learning new tools. But you've got to implement, and you've got to practice it over and over and over and over. And there's some days where it's like so easy, and then there's some days where it's super hard and it's a struggle. And I totally get it because, and I share this with my group members as well. You know, there's some days where I'm like, this is what happened, and I get you. Like, I get you. But again, because I continue to master these skills, those are things that I am really conscious about, when to stop and when to slow down and when to be present and when enough is enough, right? And so that's the thing. Okay, so Lori says, vacations and PMS are my struggles, but as soon as it's over, I get back on track, but usually gain 5 to 7 pounds. So we just did this like 2 weeks ago. This is so crazy. So we just had our last call for the coaching program for the spring term, and now we're enrolling for the summer. But we just had an entire worksheet on vacation tools, on how to eat while on vacation, on how not to, excuse the phrase, but this is how not to go hog wild, right? How not to go off plan, but yet how to enjoy yourself. And so these are some of the tools that we teach mindset wise, because I remember last year I went to Disney. I want to say it was a year ago. It might not have even been last year. It might have been 2 years ago. Because I don't even remember when it was, but I know it was Memorial Day. And over Memorial Day, we went to Disney, and Disney food, let me just say, not the greatest, but I can remember going in there, grilled chicken, and it might even been a sandwich, and I just picked off the bread. And then they had a kale salad. And I do remember the kale salad having almost like the Chick-fil-A salad where it had a little bit of sweetness in it. But I was like, it's kale and there's grilled chicken. And so it was like, that was a healthy option. I'm not going for the fries. It's going to weigh me down. I'm going to feel heavy. That's not something I want. And just, or even a bunless hamburger. So there's so many choices that you can make while on vacation that still help you to stay on plan, that still help you to kind of stay in the zone, so to speak. Now, in all honesty, it may not be a balanced macros. It may not be a balanced keto or any of those types of plans. But if you are kind of focused on, okay, that has too many carbs, or that's going to be heavy, or those kinds of things, those are going to be the situations where if you're just going for, and again, I'm exaggerating here, but if you're just going for, you know, the loaded fries and the cheesecake and old habit foods, and I'm not saying everybody eats that, but hear me, you know, if you're going for a lot of desserts and stuff like that while you're on vacation, then yes, you may gain weight. But if you know how to plan appropriately and have those allowances while you're on vacation, there are many times where I'll go on vacation and lose. I have clients that go on vacation and lose. And then some clients go on vacation and they learn about themselves because they're like, oh, this is what happened when I was on vacay. Or, ooh, this is what happened when I was on vacay. And here's what I noticed about myself. And when you have insight, that's the greatest way to learn, is to practice the insight into yourself and to work through it. So Cheryl says, would like to get over the guilt of wasting food. Having been brought up to finish all of your food, don't waste. I was brought up that way too. You know, I was part of the Clean Your Plate Club. And one of the things that I have come to kind of peace with is that it's not going to do me any good. And so even, I'm trying to think, like even bagged salads, right? They go bad too fast because there's usually 3 or 4 servings. And sometimes my husband will help eat it, but sometimes my son will, but not always. And sometimes I will actually be craving like a salad. And so sometimes I'll only get through a quarter of the bag or a third of the bag, and then I have to throw it away. And so that's part of kind of, I wouldn't say living this lifestyle, but I think it also depends on who's in your home, who else is eating the stuff and that kind of thing. But in terms of what's on your plate, if you make a small enough portion and you're using a small enough plate, and if you guys haven't heard of Live Liga, I love their plates. Shout out to Live Liga because they have a bariatric set that's really perfectly sized for us. You know what's really crazy is on your computer, Culpepper keeps popping up now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that not hysterical?
It's because I made a reservation.
Oh, I was like, what happened? I was like, oh my gosh, because one time I was on Facebook and I had mentioned something, and then all of a sudden it was showing up in my feed, and I was like, oh, Facebook is watching me. Oh my god. Okay. Lori says dark chocolate covered cherries last week was my weakness. Okay, so again, having some, 1, 2. What you do once, but what you do every day is what impacts your body. So that's what's important to recognize, is how often it happened. And then also the other thing on vacation, drink your water, right? No matter where you are, because the other thing is if you're not drinking your water, sometimes you can just get water weight gain from eating more sodium than normal. And I'm not the nutrition person, but, you know, from eating more sodium than normal and not having enough water. So that's another thing to be aware of.
You gotta have water to flush water from your
You
system.
gotta have water to flush water from your system.
And toxins and
right.
impurities and pee and poop.
All of those things.
Yes.
So, but, so in all of that, with saying all that, just seeing you live, strange seeing you with this background. It's always Patricia. Yes, I'm at her house. Enjoy your weekend. It's Pat. Wish I could be there. Can't wait to meet you. Hey there. Hey, Janet. So, okay. So the other new thought patterns that I wanted to share that I kind of went over last time, but again, got interrupted. So I kind of wanted to reinforce them. Whenever we're looking at food a certain way, we want to know, how is this growing me? What is it getting me? And so new thought patterns about not only food, but this new lifestyle. Like, how do I want to live? So here's a great journaling prompt that I want to give you guys today is how do I want to live? How do I want to live? Very broad question, and I know that, but it could be in terms of your eating behaviors. How do I want to live? How do I want to feel in terms of my eating behaviors? I wonder if I can type this. I have my notes here. So how do I want to live? How will that make me feel? And I want to say, like, ultimately, right? Because that's what this is about. It's not just moment to moment, but it's long term, right? How do I really like this setup. I think I'm going to have to get this set up in my computer with eCam. Because it makes so much sense because you can type at the same time. Okay, how do I want to live? And then how is this, whenever growing me, what is this getting me? So we usually think about food in terms of the fear of missing out. It all comes down to being honest with yourself, knowing yourself, and living intentionally. That's what the universe is telling me over and over again recently. 100%. But here's the thing, Liz. Elizabeth, sorry. I'm like, Liz, is that we are so on autopilot because we're like, okay, we have to go here. We have to go there. Okay, I have to go to work. I have to pay my bills. Okay, I have to pick up this from the grocery store. And we're so like rush, that we really need to focus on slowing down. And it's not slowing down so that you don't get things done, because you can get things done slowing down. It's slowing down the rat race in here. It's not, because we're so busy on the outside, we're also so busy on the inside. And so if we can slow down the inside and be a little bit more present with ourselves, and I will say that a lot of us are avoiding feeling the feelings because there's some fear of what could come up. But I promise you, the more present and intentional and conscious that you are, the more fulfilled your life will be. Let me add a caveat to that, as long as you're dealing with your shit. Because if you're avoiding it, right, living with intention is huge. But if you're avoiding it, you're going to have to face it at some point. But it's not always bad. It's like I think that I posted this somewhere last week or 2 weeks ago. You grow through what you go through. Grow through what you go through. So you have to grow through what you're going through. We all go through stuff. And a lot of people on this live stream will know that I go through stuff, right? Just because I don't announce it doesn't mean I don't go through it, right? I go through stuff. We all go through stuff. We're all human, okay? But what's important to recognize is that we all have different tools in how we deal with stuff. And you need proper tools, right? Mindset tools, behavioral tools to get you through it so that you can say in your heart of hearts, I'm okay and I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to work through this and get through this, and that you walk your talk. You don't just talk the talk, right? So that's what I think is important. So now, living with intention, Sarah, 100%. Growth is hard and hurts, but on the other side, it's so worth it. Absolutely. Hey, Sandy. So growth is hard, but it's like what I said last time, I think at the beginning, which is, I want to say I said it at the beginning, which is, if you're walking up a hill and you tell yourself, oh my gosh, this is so hard. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. It's going to be hard. But if you look for the silver lining, if you look for, wow, this is going to make me feel so good after, if you're focused on, I can do this, just a couple more steps. Wow, I'm almost there. And if you have a change in your self-talk, and if you're far more encouraging and far more loving to yourself and far more compassionate with yourself, then what will end up happening is you'll get there faster, you'll get there easier, and you'll be like, whoa, that was pleasant. I think I might do that again. But inside your head beforehand, there's this whole pattern of, oh, this is going to be hard. Oh, I don't want to do it. And there's this apprehension, which creates the emotional resistance. And so if you have a pattern of creating emotional resistance over time, then it's going to recur over and over and over. So what I want to help you do is to reprogram your brain so that emotional resistance is more the exception than the rule. But for most people, it's the rule rather than the exception. Are you with me? Okay. So, I am also going to pull up. So you guys may or may not know, we are currently enrolling for the Bariatric Mindset Group program, which we're doing a turnover next Wednesday. So enrollment is open through next Wednesday. And I've had a lot of questions. And so I thought we would do a Q&A with Patricia because, it's so difficult for me to ask myself questions and be like, so Kristen, what do you think? So wait, Sarah says, so true. Taking care of your health allows you to deal with your stuff with courage and strength. Absolutely. Vulnerability too. So the question that we've gotten most often.
Yes. Okay. So, Kristen,
Yeah.
how exactly is your group coaching different from the book study that we just did?
Oh, yes. So, and the book study is actually finishing this coming week.
Yes, next week.
Next week.
Yep.
So, and for those who are interested in the book study, that's going to get reopened in May. Mm-hmm. So that's still happening. But the group coaching program is very different because the book study goes through the book and it works through the book. And
Chapter
you get
by chapter.
Chapter by chapter, and you get additional tools in terms of working through the book.
Right.
However, those tools are based on the book, and they're based on, I would say, I wouldn't call them generic tools, but tools that are more guided towards the general population.
Yes.
Okay?
That's a good way to put it.
Right. So the other thing that I think is important, an important difference, is that in the group coaching program, everybody gets talk time twice a month where they get to share what it is that they're going through with the group and with me. So it's like a very, like, almost like a mini one-on-one where you're saying, okay, this is what I'm struggling with. And I go through a series of questions where I have you break down your struggles. And the first call is not like this, but from week to week, because you're working on stuff, what ends up happening is we're like, what are your successes? Because bariatric patients forget that they're successes because they focus on their failures. So we look for what tools are you using? Why? Because it's important that you're using the tools. And if you're not using the tools, then we need to give you an effective tool to use to practice. Because remember, the gold is in the implementation, right? It's not in the knowledge. Because you can know stuff all day long. Pre-op, I knew stuff. We know stuff. It's not the knowing that makes the difference. It's the doing, right? So it's that practice point and being able to practice it and go, oh my gosh, I learned this. Oh my gosh, I learned that. And then the next part is like, what are your struggles? What are you really fighting with so that we can create a tool specific for you, your struggles, your issues. And then usually what happens is that it's like one person will say, oh my gosh, I'm struggling with this. And then we go through our questions and we're done. And then it's on to the next person. And the next person goes, oh my gosh, I was just listening to her and I'm going through the same thing. I mean, my situation's different, but here's what I'm going through. And I think I want that tool too, because here's what I'm going through. Boom, 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 boom. And so it doesn't always follow like that for everyone. But I would say on a given call, you have, 10 people and there's a couple different people that are struggling with the same thing. And they relate and it makes them feel like, okay, I'm normal. Like this is normal, because I think within our population, a lot of people think that they're alone. They feel isolated. They're struggling. And some of the support groups out there they're giving all of this stuff. And again, there's this overwhelm, but when you see people going through the same thing and you have a very pinpointed tool that's like, this is it. This is exactly, that's what I'm going through. This is the tool that I'm ready to practice. And then the other thing is we tweak the tool. If you're like, okay, this was working really well. And then somebody else might be like, that's not, I did it a couple times, but I really need to. Then we kind of go through like more of a hard hitting, like, what are your priorities? What are you focused on? Why did you struggle this week? Because if it's not the tool itself, then we need to talk about priorities. We need to talk about planning. We need to talk about other things. So it's like a swift kick in the butt, a loving one, but that's where the individualized, personalized attention comes in.
It's customized accountability.
It's customized accountability without paying the one-on-one price, to be quite honest. Elizabeth says, ooh, ouch, that's so me. I know I have a hard time actually doing. Tanya says the doing is always the most difficult part.
Even for us, you guys. I mean, we're not exempt from this.
No.
Trust me.
No.
It's
Yeah.
It's work.
It's
all the
work.
time.
It's work.
So.
And that's where the mindset piece really comes in, is that you've got to kind of really flex it, practice it, right? And I write all the time. And sometimes I feel like I sound, and of course, a lot of people are so young now, they don't even know what a broken record is, right?
They're coming back.
Okay, but
My
what is my other analogy?
Albums.
What's another analogy other than a broken record? But I say it so often, we have to practice. We have to practice because, and that's what I said this last week in the book study group, is that if we don't practice these tools, then God forbid you lose a parent. God forbid you're going through an emotional situation with a family member. God forbid you have a spouse lose a job or something like that. But then all of a sudden you're in crisis mode, and in crisis mode you go back to autopilot. You don't use any new tools because you haven't practiced any new tools, and so now you're struggling. Like now you're really struggling. And then that's when people kind of creep into regain, because they're like, oh my gosh, the last 6 months of my life, I have been going back to old habits, and how do I stop? And so that's where this really comes in. Now we do have worksheets, just like the book study has worksheets, but how it's also chiefly different is they're, well, I wouldn't say they're personalized to the group. So the tools are personalized to what the group members need. It's not based on the book, which is the book study. So again, more personalized accountability versus more of a individualized accountability.
Yeah.
So, okay, all sessions are recorded and they're downloadable. So in the book study, they're live streams. These are Zoom calls. And if you guys don't know what Zoom is, it's an online platform where we engage. Amy says, I wasn't using the tools and I lost my brother very suddenly 2 years ago, and I dove off the deep end and regained 50 pounds of the 90 that I had lost. First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. And this is something that I can tell you that when because you've already signed up, you're going to meet other group members who have lost parents, who have lost siblings, who have lost different individuals in their lives. And this is exactly, I'm so glad that you joined, because you're in the right place. Because that's exactly what we work through. Now, we don't do just grief stuff, right? We get you back on track, but it's how to grow through what you go through. Maybe that should be a slogan. But anyways, but it's really helping you to flex it to get back, because, while this is coaching, it's not counseling. And a lot of people, I've said this before, a lot of people in the group have counselors that they're working with. We give you the tools so that you can move forward towards your goals and not go backwards and dig into stuff. Because if you do need counseling and there is trauma from the past, definitely go seek a counselor. While I am a counselor, we're doing coaching in this group, which is far different, which is more future focused, giving you the tools that you need, helping you to implement, lovingly kicking your butt, giving you the accountability, the productivity, those tools to help you move forward. The other thing that's in this group is I give an overall, and I teach about the EFT taps. So if that is also in the book in
so good.
chapter 6, where we have the tapping points and stuff. So we have EFT taps, we have meditations, we have the worksheets. We also have an intention setting worksheet. And while there are a lot of worksheets, and some people are like, oh my God, right? There are some people that are like, they have their little workbook and they have it together and they want all that stuff, fine. And then there's some people that are like, I'm only going to do the bi-weekly worksheets. And it's like, good. So there's room for everybody. The people who are really OCD and need to have absolutely everything outlined. And then there's something for the people, right, who are just like,
just give me the nuts and bolts.
Just give me the nuts and bolts. I just need to know my tool for the next 2 weeks. So that's how it's very different. Also, in my group, and I want to make this distinction, in my group, her groups are different. In my group, I allow my people to do live streams because I think it helps them process. Because we don't have time on our big coaching calls to do processing. But if you're needing to process, it's a very safe space to process. And people love you and encourage you and support you. And it's a private, secret group and nobody else sees it. So I want to share that. Did I answer?
Okay, well, a couple of the other questions that I thought about were, what can members expect to get to or work on in the group? And you did kind of talk about that.
Okay.
So we kind of covered that. Would it be personalized for those that join? We pretty much covered that.
Okay.
Time commitment.
Oh, okay. So the time commitment, again, it depends on how OCD you are.
Or just how ready you are.
How ready you are.
How
okay.
ready.
Okay. So we have calls. This is the other thing is we have 4 calls every 2 weeks. So we have a Wednesday night call, a Thursday night call, and a Thursday day call, all in 1 week. The following week, we have a Wednesday call. So there's 4 different options for which call you can speak on, right? Mm-hmm. And then it kind of repeats itself. So you have 4 different options, and they're 3-hour time blocks. So essentially, there's 24 hours of content. You do not have to come to every call. You can only come to the calls that you want to speak on, or if it helps you for support, you can come to every single call and you can download every single call. And you get 24 hours of content per month of all of that stuff.
Right. And guys, one thing that, because I am in her group and kind of as a bystander and I contribute sometimes, but one of the things that I think is most amazing to see from this is that you have people coming in who, I know I need help, but I'm not ready to take on all of this.
Oh, yeah.
And so they will go through at just enough to kind of get their feel, and then they resubscribe. They jump in on the next class and take it to the next level. And then they jump in on so there are multiple repeat people who go through her program over and over, and every single time, because I've talked to a whole lot of them because some of them are my members too, they get more and more and more and more and more every single time they enroll. And so, they scratch the surface the first time because they're not really sure where to go or what to do.
Right.
Then the next time they're like, they have an idea. And so this is what I want to work on. And maybe there's several things they need to work on and they really want to focus on one.
Right.
And then the next time they come back, they'll continue working on that one, but now we're ready to dig into the next level. Because maybe they had to address this one before they could get to the point where they could address this one.
Or, because this happened in the August session, which went from August to December, we had 3 members lose a parent.
Yeah.
In that session. 3. And it was, some of them knew it was coming. And,
it doesn't make it easier.
It doesn't make it easier. But they had said, holy crap, I didn't regain because I was here.
Yeah.
And there was one member that said, none of the people in my community reached out, but y'all did. And so I think that speaks to the closeness of who we are. And it also is who I attract. So I attract people who care about each other and who really are ready to level up. And the other part is that some people can't come to the live calls because of their job, or they're just too scared to speak. And so I'll tell people, you send me a message or you post in the group, or if you're comfortable enough to do a live stream. I mean, if you're not comfortable enough to get on the call, you may not be comfortable enough to do a live stream. But it's like, message me, you tell me what it is that you need, that you want to work on, and then I'll address it on the call. And so there's a way to make it happen if you can't make the time blocks.
Right.
That's why I have a daytime. That's why I have a nighttime. I mean, I'll be honest, I can't stay up past 9 o'clock Eastern because I would die. Because I'm up at 5 in the morning. But that's 6 o'clock Pacific. But we have a lot of Pacific members that will come on right at 5 o'clock, right after they get off of work. I have some that pop on right at 3, which is 6 o'clock Eastern. And so there's, sometimes there's a way to make it work, and sometimes I understand that there's not. So the flexibility is there so that you can get the most out of it, and then get your questions answered.
And I want to reiterate just a teeny bit on, it's a super safe place, you guys. And I know just from my groups and what I do and what I work with, that there are a lot of people out there with relationship issues with their spouses, and they have nowhere to turn. This is a place that you can get help in dealing with those issues that impact your success on your journey. So Kristen deals with relationships. That's, part of, some of what she weaves into this. And, this may be the only place you have because you don't have family you can go talk to, or you don't have whatever. So, there's so many levels of how this is so beneficial that there's something here for everyone. There truly is. There truly is.
And on our last call, and I can't share it, to be quite honest, because our last call inside the group was very private, but one of our members said, and this is where I wish I could share it, but I can't, where she was like, the friendships that I've gotten out of being in this group, she's like, are irreplaceable.
Yeah.
The friendships that I've made, the real, true friendships, the people who really, when I'm having a hard day and I share in the group, are like, hey, how are you doing? Like, she's like, I didn't have people like that in my life, who I could truly trust, who I could truly relate to, and all of that. Anyways, if this speaks to you, if it moves you, join us.
Yep.
And we'll work on your stuff. So sending you guys lots of love. If you have questions, let me know. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the group.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to let you do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
All right, bye guys.